Alrighty. Well, thanks everyone for coming back. We've done a couple of videos. So we've done two on the early days of Ethereum, and I actually did another video on identity following that, which you can check out on my channel. And in the process, we're excited to reconnect with Bob Summerwill. So Bob will ask to introduce himself in a second, but he actually went quite in depth in reaction to the videos and helping to work together to patch up the whole story from our collective memory on the early days of Ethereum. Wrote a long blog post that you should check out, and we'll link in the notes. And we asked him to join us here today to kind of dig more into the story and also just generally catch up. So with that, maybe I'll hand it to Bob to do a quick intro, and we can just kind of get into it.
So yeah, hi. Thanks so much for the invite. Like I said to you guys, I love those first two videos. I love this history, and it was great to, both hear that and have a slightly different perspective as well. Our paths have overlapped in some ways and haven't in others. So there were a few things that came up which I wasn't myself aware of. I mean, just for everyone's background about me and who I am. So I got interested in blockchain in 2014, but it was 2015 where I really kind of jumped in, and that happened because I was working in Toronto. I had a 6-month contract and was working in Toronto around the same time that Ethereum was doing a mainnet launch. And I'd actually met Vitalik for the first time in 2014, but, just kind of following along a little bit, not actually doing anything. But then moving to Toronto, it's just like orders of magnitude more stuff going on, and, meetups and, Anthony Diorio's Bitcoin Decentral co-working space and everything. So I got really very addicted through that year. And it was like, right, I can't not get involved, right? It's like you're there at the birth of the web or whatever, and you've met Tim Berners-Lee and he's about to go live on the web, and it's like, how can you not want to get involved? So I just started sort of volunteering and helping. My background prior to that was in the games industry, so 15 years of C++. 15 years of C++. So I was like, well, I can do something with CPP Ethereum. And I was really into mobile and wearables. So my first thing I set myself is, can I get Ethereum running on my smartwatch? Could you get a smartwatch and go around and bing, there's some money, that'd be really cool. So yeah, I just started doing stuff on there. That was about the time that Gav was parting company with the foundation as well. So there was kind of a dearth of people on that team. So that period, I ended up being I think the only person in the world who was actually helping on that. No companies, nobody was helping. And then I ended up getting hired into the foundation in early 2016. And yeah, I've been involved on Ethereum, Enterprise Ethereum, Hyperledger, then more recently Ethereum Classic. It's nearly a decade now.
Yeah, Bob, and to be open to everyone, we're old friends, and we're happy to have you as our first guest host on this thing. But also, you are the Nelson Mandela of the Ethereum ecosystem. You're friends with everyone. You've been in everywhere. So it's great to have your perspective on things.
Thank you.
So as Kieran has mentioned, for anyone who hasn't seen Bob's blog post, it's notionally a blog post, almost a full novel, probably a novella size. It has pictures of a lot of the people we're talking about. You dug up so much content out of there. Were those your personal pictures? It's just stuff.
Yeah, just stuff I had. I mean, another thing here is there's a couple of articles on my own blog from earlier that I linked into there as well, which was, there's one called Ethereum Foundation People and one called Ethereum Foundation Timeline. So I made those in late 2017, early 2018, because there was no canonical history of any of this.
Yeah.
It's like, how did Ethereum start? I mean, it's in people's heads. It's all secondhand stories that you hear from people that were around, but, you know, it's like, what's true, what isn't? Because I think, especially on that like foundation side, it was such a mess, right? Just like all different people weren't getting on, blowing up, kind of like parity versus the foundation and Charles, you know, and like, God, what, you know, so I think some people had almost taken this position of like, we don't talk about that, right?
Right.
Because anything I say, like, it's going to offend somebody else. So just la la la, it doesn't matter that, you know. But yeah, so I started gathering that list of, well, you know, who were the people that were around in the pre-foundation days and in that, and so yeah, I've got this one page, this people page, which I think is really cool. Just it's got, so that's basically from 2013 through to early 2018, identifying anyone that I could that was involved with Ethereum pre-foundation,
yeah,
or who worked for the foundation in those early years. And one of the things that's really great there is DevCon 0, which happened in, I think, October 2014. So that was the very first DevCon, but it was a closed event. That wasn't a public event.
Yeah.
And it was foundation people at that time, but there were also, you know, some other key community sorts of people there as well. And they did this one thing at the start that was introductions. So there's this video that's about 15 or 20 minutes long of everybody like, hi, I'm Vlad, I'm here doing, you know, proof of stake research. Just see these, you know, so young, so many people that, you know, like really early 20s,
yeah,
you know, and turning up, and it's like, that's, you know, that's so-and-so, right? And some of these people as well, you know, they're not involved anymore, you know, they're sort of like footnotes in history, but you have that record. And so yeah, that list of people, I got all of that together. And the reason that came about was in late 2017, I got a message from Laura Shin saying, hey, I hear Ming's been sacked at the foundation. Like, do you know anything about this?
right.
And I said, well, no, I don't, but it wouldn't surprise me. You know, basically it would be like Vitalik or maybe Hudson could tell you, but like nobody else could tell you. Anyway, and you know, it sort of came out, well, yeah, she's, you know, she's not been sacked, but she's agreed to leave.
Right.
And then it's like, well, what's next? So I contacted Vitalik and said, you know, hey, is there anything I can do to help? You know, what can I do? You know, and he said, well, the one thing you can do is, can you like try and talk to people and work out, like, you know, what would good look like?
Right.
What do people think a good Ethereum Foundation would look like? And so that started my sort of adventure, really, of like, right, I'm going to go and talk to all the founders, all the other people, and try and work out, like, you know, what. And then that just turned into really a mind, you know, a thought experiment on my side of like, okay, so, you know, to my mind, Ming was terrible. So how did she get hired? Like, what was going on, you know, whatever, 2.5 years back, that looked like a good option? You know, like how did it work before? You know, like how did the foundation come about? And like, what were the group of leaders, and like, what were all the dynamics between all of these people? So, yeah, I went down quite a rabbit hole there, and that was the sort of the genesis for that information gathering. And I learned a lot. And that information as well, I gave to Laura and to the other 2 authors that were doing their Ethereum books, is kind of like, right, there is no canonical, but this is kind of what I found, which is maybe like the best information that there was at that time.
Yeah. Well, and also it's to your point, it's that I think generally people have sort of survivorship bias about, you know, like everything works smooth, but innovation is messy, it's messy, and it's like, there are 1,000,001 different paths that things could have went to, and we just want to kind of acknowledge all that, like, like given where the ecosystem is today, and even though, it's amazing to me that so many people know about it, that we all spent the first years trying to get anyone to listen to us talk about blockchain, and no one, everyone just glaze over, right? So it's just kind of nice to take that retrospective view at this point. Oh, went a little bit far.
I'm going blurry.
Okay, we'll just go with it.
One of the things that I know that Vitalik said, and again, it was maybe in Laura Shin's book, was like the founding of Ethereum was very atypical, because it was essentially like, here's a white paper out to a bunch of random people who may be interested, and it's like basically like first people that turn up, right, you're the founders. And like, a number of them, they'd not even met each other before, not really a lot of knowledge, and so yeah, like there were lots of interpersonal things that just didn't work at all. It's just like, like founding a company, and I'm sure you guys have this experience yourself, right? You want to start with people that you kind of know and trust a bit, because you know that you're going through the fire together. So you better have some stickability with you, and common alignment, or at least knowing that you've got good communication to go through those bad times, right? And you know that you can work it out. And what seemed to happen on Ethereum was absolutely the polar opposite of that. It's just random bunch of people who were there, didn't really know each other, like make that commitment before you even know what you're even doing, right?
Yeah.
And so that didn't work so great.
And I think also,
let me actually, I wanted to ask about that. I'm also just looking at the list of the Ethereum Foundation people, which is remarkably long for the type of initiative it was. We talk about this because we're a management team, and we're trying to get people to focus on particular goals and things our company wants to do and such. Do you think there is any benefit to this level of, you could call it disorganization, or just, I kind of think if there were a benefit, and it wasn't merely just an inefficient and painful process that Ethereum succeeded in spite of, it's kind of, it embodied the ethos, and it let people, like Vitalik put the idea out there, and then people fought for its destiny. Like Ethereum existed, and then they wanted to be part of taking it to, and he saw this with the clients and all that too. Sorry, Jim, go ahead.
I was going to say it kind of worked like a blockchain works, in fact.
Yeah.
Lots of random people coming together with some underlying principle to organize things, and then they fight it out.
Well, what's that law that organization technology reflects the organization?
Conway's law, I think.
So yeah, something like that. Like, yes, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I guess in general, yes, having that like frothing emergent like stuff is good. I think where it was really screwed though was to do with money and the ICO funding, right? That it's basically like, okay, here we're doing the thing, and here the money is all actually in this organizational group, and the people in that group are being funded, are in this privileged position. It's something which Brian Bellendorf said to me in later years, was it's sort of like the original sin of Ethereum is, if you want to have that kind of collaboration, so, whatever stuff like the EA and Hyperledger, or even just, the rather looser protocol development around Ethereum, you don't want to pay one team and not the others, because that just screws that battlefield. So you have this situation, for example, where you've got the C++ client and you've got a Geth. You did have the Python client as well, so you had that good triangulation, but it was essentially like the funded ones were C++ and Go, and then they had the money crisis of like, oh my god, is this thing even going to happen? Right, we've got cut scope, C++ is gone, Gab ends up going out of the way. And then you had parity, having one of the major clients, but without funding. Right. So it's like Geth, that's the favored child, right? It's not like the official client, but it is the official client. So all that sort of like separation of implementation versus specification and that free market around that was really skewed because the money was with Geth, and Geth were in the foundation, and they've got Vitalik's kind of blessing and everything. So I think that's where things weren't great, because you did have the diversity, but it wasn't fair diversity. And I think if you look at what's happening now on the consensus clients for, I was going to say Ethereum 2, it's not called Ethereum 2 anymore, but the separation that you have with those execution clients and consensus clients, none of those consensus clients are made by the foundation. The foundation doesn't have client teams. They do funding, like they got the grants, and I think all of those teams are going to be grant recipients. So that's kind of centralization in a way, but it is an even playing field in terms of the development, right? Because you've got an evenness of funding, and that wasn't the case, originally for Ethereum. And I think that made a lot of bitterness as well, because it's like, well, why have you guys got the money? Like we're making another one as well, and or other parts of the ecosystem. Like there wasn't a grants program for a number of years.
Yeah.
Between about 2015 and 2018, there wasn't even a grants program. You got the foundation sitting on hundreds of millions of dollars, and teams couldn't even get funded for doing anything. So yeah, I think the diversity is good, but the money was bad.
Interesting. Yeah, I think, right. Okay, it's a good strong point. So if you compare to like a Bitcoin, which I know less about the history of the development of Bitcoin, but it was kind of similar. There was no pre-mine and no token pre-sale. And so the people who were in it for general interest, and it was really sincerely an even playing field. And I would argue, in some ways, Ethereum has made bigger strides than Bitcoin, especially since, let's say 2015, some of the value prop of Bitcoin is that it never changes. And that's kind of part of why it holds its value in some way. But it's, I think, been stifled a little bit for that reason. I think it's pretty hard probably to make step function positive changes in a fully decentralized manner.
And I mean, another major difference there, talking about clients, is it was a very deliberate decision, right, on Ethereum to separate the specification from the clients, and that there were multiple clients from day one. I see if I can find my Twitter thread. I was finding these the other day. I was finding the first commits for Pi Ethereum, Pi App, or Pi Ethereum as it was, CPP Ethereum and Go Ethereum. And they were all, I think they were all November or December. I think they were all 2013, not even 2014 for those three.
Yeah.
And then Ethereum J looked like it started in about April, I think. But,
well,
that was...
Yeah, Jim, Kieran, you guys started Ethereum H in 2014, right?
Yeah, we were much later. We were, when did we get going?
Fourth quarter 2014.
Yeah, that's right.
Sounds about right.
And I had worked on Ethereum just in the summer, so starting kind of maybe June 2014. I got to know the project pretty well. And then I'd gone back to Berkeley. I was in New York for the summer and met Jim September, October, something like that. And we started work more or less right away, more Jim than me. But so there was a big time delay on our side. And yeah, I think, okay, yeah, Bob, it's an interesting point, right? I think probably they could have, there was some real mismanagement at different times, both with the running out of funds, not doing any hedging. And then later, I guess I agree that it could have just been more fair and open feeling, and that would have alienated fewer people, and it could have even just been bigger than it is today. Obviously, we're talking about a smashing success here, but it's sort of the idea and the community was so powerful that it, there's definitely a succeeded in spite of aspect. I think there was value still in this, like, throw it out there, get people to fight over it, but it probably overcorrected, and lots of these people also just went and started their own thing because it wasn't a big enough tent.
I mean, the other thing is right at the start there, it's like, well, the people that are doing it, that was the whole world, right? That was everything, right? Was several months. I mean, all of that early work on the clients actually was before the foundation even existed. That was actually unfunded.
Yeah.
Because I'm looking at the dates. So the white paper came out in November 2013. Pi Ethereum was started on November the 19th. 2013. Gav actually was in contact with Vitalik on that same day. CPP Ethereum started 4 days later, 23rd of December. Obviously, some over Christmas hacking on these things going on. And then Go Ethereum was December the 26th. So just 3 further days. The foundation got formed, I think, in April or May 2014, but the crowd sale didn't conclude until September 2014. So you'd actually got about 9 months worth of development on all of these 3 clients that was actually unfunded. So I think that unfairness kind of came in a little bit later. I think for that phase it was like nobody got funded. Oh, sorry. Nobody got funded, though there was the retrospective payback, right? When the crowd sale had gone through, you had, money for early contributors, which I think that was nearly 10%.
Yeah.
For like 100, 120 people. Like some people made out like absolute bandits for those early months. But then, following that, there was hiring of actual, staff onto those teams. And that, I think, is when it became kind of uneven, because you already had Ethereum J for a number of months there, and that, that never got funded. And then you guys starting whenever you were starting. So, it kind of became uneven, I think, at that point. And probably the worst of it of all was for Parity. When that team spun out, and you basically did have a major, rapidly load-bearing client, and it was just, unfunded, especially with Gav, who was, had been the CTO and wrote the yellow paper and had the first working client, and all of the value he delivered, and then it's like, right, sorry, you're out, and you're not getting any money.
Yes. Do you So my memory around the C++ client was that there were funds to do a security audit for 2 clients, but one at a time. And it was tight, right? And so they did go Ethereum first. And I think they did actually do the security audit on CPP Ethereum, but I'm not quite sure.
I'm not sure they did, Maybe there'd been an intention to do that, but then the money ran out before it happened. My understanding in terms of uptake as well is CPP Ethereum was like working first, but then Go Ethereum just like caught up and overtook it like really fast. So when they were making those decisions on cutting funding, which would have been mid 2015, it's like, hey, Gav, you're the CTO, but it's your code base that's got to cop it. And then that's what happened. And
I was sort of building the various clients quite a bit because I was trying to integrate with them at the time. And my memory was that the C++ client had all the newest stuff in it first. So if I wanted to see something first, I would go there. But the Go client was more stable. Like, because I think because they were putting so much stuff into the C++ client, it was often in an unstable situation. And so I would typically kind of go to C++ first to see the new stuff. But if it wasn't building that day, I would run over to Go and try it out.
Yeah, I mean, and that would make complete sense, because the other thing to know with the C++ client is that was where the test suites were done. You know, like all the tests were generated out of that code base. So as you say, all of the protocol changes or whatever would happen there first, then you do the test generation through that, and then those were the tests for other clients. So even when CPP Ethereum as a client like died, it didn't die within that testing suite for years. It's like, right, even though nobody's actually like running this or using it on mainnet or anything, you know, we've got to keep maintaining that one, because that's where the tests are coming from. So yeah, that front line was really like leading across SolC, the tests, and CPP Ethereum. You know, all of those actually were bundled together into a single workspace as well, with all of the GUI apps, like with Mix and Aleph 0, Aleph 1, Aleph 5. Like, it took 24 hours to build the bloody thing. But that will be because it was all around Gav, right? You know, Gav was leading all of that. You know, he was building that client. He was writing the yellow paper. He was, you know, working there with Christian and Christoph on that specification and testing stuff like that. You know, all of that was there. And then on Jeff's side, you know, it was, but you know, just doing Geth, right? It wasn't a broader thing. And that Geth team were working closer with Mist, you know, with Avsar on Mist. Like for a good while, I don't think CPP Ethereum even worked with Mist. You know, it's like all these groups not really talking to each other. But yeah, that would make sense. Like a lot of it was Gav led.
And wait, SolC, the Solidity compiler, that was part of that C++ group too?
Yeah,
that makes sense because it was written in C++, but
yeah, it was all under Web3 umbrella.
Okay.
I remember Web3 umbrella.
I remember
Yeah.
Web3 umbrella. Yes.
So
okay.
yeah, Web3 umbrella was a Git repo with sub repos for you know, for F. It was called F. It was just called F, the executable. So you had F and Geth. But yeah, you had F, you had SolC, you had Mix, which was the original IDE.
Yes.
Qt client. You had Aleph 0, which was the GUI miner.
Yeah, that's right.
So it's like, right, here's a GUI, press the mine button, and you know. And then you had Aleph 1, which was sort of, I guess it was like kind of like a GUI client runner thing. I can't remember the exact scope, but it was sort of like, right, you're running a node, but you kind of got a GUI on it, and I can't remember what it had, but you know, whatever, logs going by, and I guess you could like fiddle with settings or whatever. But yeah, all of that was in Web3 umbrella.
That's a lot. That was a lot.
Yeah, and all of the they were all really tests and the tests as well, right?
Right.
So then they were all really codependent. I mean, when I started, one of the first things I did was like, what are the dependencies on all of these things? Like, what is all of this stuff? Because you had like libraries with it as well. It's like lib Ethereum, lib Web3 base.
Yeah. Dev P2P, live P2P. There was documentation all over the place.
I mean,
you know,
I think what had happened there that Gab was sort of trying to do, but it never came to fruition, and then he left, was it's like, right, let's try and make this modular, right? We're going to try and do a modular thing and pull apart the networking and the database and this, that, and the other. But it was pulled apart into separate repos before there were actually stable interfaces between any of these. So you had to use the latest stuff of anything anyway. Like, you couldn't mix and match because there was no versioning, there was no interface discipline on any of it. you had to use all the latest ones together, but then it was all split into these separate repos. So it's like, right, you're making a change on one of them and then whatever, updating the submodules, and like that wasn't atomic. It was just a big old mess. So yeah, one of the first things I did was like, you know, work out, infer a dependency diagram, map a path to pulling it all back into a monolithic workspace, doing like automated builds that we somehow didn't have, and specifically decoupling Solcy and the tests from the client, right?
Right.
So for Solcy, for example, because it was tied in with this full workspace, it was literally a 24-hour build. It was like compiling Chromium from source twice, compiling Qt, all of this stuff. So just to get, you know, and there weren't binaries available for Solcy either. Like you had to build all of this stuff yourself to be able to like compile, you know, a smart contract to do anything. You had to do all of that. So I remember, you know, after all that decomposition, I got it so you could just do Solcy, and you know, that was a quick build. And then I did like homebrew, and it's like, so you could do like brew install Solcy, and it did it in like 5 seconds. And everyone's like, oh my God, this is such great work. I benefit. It's amazing. But yeah, it was a bit of a mess.
I do remember waiting, like, you know, many times trying to build things, coming back, looking at it, saying like, this can't be, like, my machine's got to be broken, because like it can't be this long, can't be like 8 hours. Like nothing I could imagine would take more than 8 hours to do, you know. But you're right, it's just like,
you know, talking about that, you know, creative brew of lots of different people and coordinated and everything. One of my first observations on joining the foundation is these people seem allergic to professionalism, because that's seen as, you know, in an organized way. Well, you're one of the baddies, you know, you're the status quo, you're trying to subvert it and take it over. You know, things as simple as like, you know, have we got like technical leads that actually lead? You know, have we got any project management? Have we got any IT? Have we got anything? And it's like, no, it's just like a jumble of people doing stuff. And it's like, well, how on earth can you develop software in such a chaotic environment? But that was kind of the vibe as well. That was seen as a good thing. You know, because that's a defensive cultural thing, right? You know, we don't want this to be a Silicon Valley thing.
yeah,
You know,
and-
I think I just have a comment. It's interesting, and maybe I commented on this in one of the other videos. One of these rare big software projects that did not very much come from the United States. It's Canada, it's different parts of Europe, you know. And one of those confusing things about, to your point about who got paid for the clients on the foundation, I think, like, I remember there being a deal struck with Zug, the canton basically around it. They were like, there's tax stuff and all that sort of thing, but they also sort of intended to hire and operate locally. People would either move there or they'd hire ETH Zurich grads or whatever. And I don't know the details specifically, but I think that didn't quite end up happening that way. And sort of as a surprise, and I saw some of this firsthand at the meeting in which you know, Amir and Charles were you know, sent on their way. The client team set up in their own countries, and that was like a bit of a script flip. Like Gavin wanted to be in Berlin because I guess the devs were good and expensive, and to be like living there, you know, inexpensive, excuse me. And yeah, I think it's just, you know, running my own business, you would never make such a decision in such a flip manner where like overnight we're like, oh, we're doing a different country, you know. But that was kind of a regular occurrence to some extent. Major things changing, you know, as part of how the foundation plus sort of operated that I saw. And again, it didn't seem to hurt, you know, quite as much as you might expect. But I think, you had to have, you were lucky in how how excited people were about the project, that it survived all of this. And again, from our side, we're sitting in the Bay Area at that time, and we're like, why do they keep doing all of these things? Like, they're trying to build 1,000 things, and it's hard to build one thing.
Yeah, I mean, there were separate legal entities for those as well, right? So you had ETHDEV AG in Berlin, and then there was an Amsterdam thing for the Geth team. You had the London stuff as well, which was mainly communications sort of stuff. With Stefan and George Hallam, Ian Meikle, and one other person who I forget. But you sort of talk about these people working for the Ethereum Foundation, but it was always woollier than that. So yeah, you did have the Stiftung in Zug, but most people, even if they're working full time, they weren't actually working for that. So when I had my contract, it was with the for-profit ETHDEV in Berlin. That was who I was actually working for, and then they were funded by the foundation. And ETHDEV in general, that was another big split that there was, right? You got the foundation, but then you had ETHDEV that was like the kind of umbrella group for that Gav was leading, essentially. So I think the Amsterdam thing rolled into Berlin. I think that was all sort of ETHDEV side. And that in itself was a huge item of conflict. I know, again, in Laura's book, I think Joe was talking about that, right? Was that Gav kind of wanted a big chunk of money. It's like, right, the funds are there from the crowd sale now, so give them all to us, right? And it's like, I don't know that we want to give you all the funds, as you go. But that was typical of that period, is just a mess of complexity and interpersonal things and organizational complexity. And with that Swiss people thing, so my understanding on that was like a main motivation for renting that spaceship building, right? Was the intention was that there were going to be a load of people there, but maybe it was, I think testing was one of the ones I heard was maybe a goal there. It's like, right, we're going to get a load of Swiss people to test things. And there was also Mihai with his Holon ideas, of these co-working spacey things around the world.
And also to make it a little bit more woollier, same time, very shortly, Consensus emerged out of that too, and they were doing a bunch of work. We were working, we were technically working under Consensus for the first low parts of it too, and all of that was in the mix, everywhere. So I want to jump ahead a bit, because we have you as an ETC expert, and in our last one we had a lot of questions around what we remembered from Slock.it and the DAO hack. So maybe you could walk us through that, and how ETC emerged out of that. That part was a little bit vague to us, because we didn't follow much on how those pieces all came together.
Yeah, so I mean, one of the groups or companies that came out of this kind of shrinking of the foundation was that on that C++ team that got most of the cuts, a good chunk of those people went straight to Parity, and just carried on with that new client. But Christoph Jens, who had been leading that testing effort that we were just talking about, those same tests, he and Stefan Tual, who had been community communications lead, that sort of thing, community stuff, and Lefteris, who'd also been on C++ team, those three went off and formed a company called Slock.it. So Slock.it being smart locks, just the idea that whatever, if you're doing an Airbnb or something, that you can you know, that you could have a smart lock and that you could go and do your contract with someone for the rental, and then that could be, you know, enabling something on the lock that's checking an oracle or an on-chain thing, and so on. And so that was their product area. At DevCon 1, they did like an on-stage demo that was like a kettle, like a pot.
Yeah, I remember
and
that.
it's like doing a transaction that turned it on to make a cup of tea.
Yeah.
Like that was the on-stage demo. But what seemed to happen there was like they didn't want to do an ICO. They wanted it to be fairer, I guess, because around that era, though more later, you know, you saw lots of cash grab ICOs, and it's like, right, here's all the money up front. You know, we're not going to live it. What are you going to do?
Right.
So they didn't want to do that, you know, because they were very genuine people who come out of the foundation and were, you know, kind of, you know, ideologically driven. So Vitalik had written stuff about DAOs, right? You know, I think they were mentioned in the white paper even. And it's like, well, maybe we can make a DAO. So, and I think that was just Slock.it DAO really originally. And it was like, right, we're going to have a DAO. The money's going to go into there, but then it's only going to get released to us as we deliver milestones. So it's kind of like this separation of like, right, the DAO is where the money is, and that's controlled by the token holders. Slock.it as a company is a service provider into that, but we're a sackable service provider, and we're only going to get paid as we go through the milestones. So it's like, oh, yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
And to my understanding, that's what was presented at DevCon 1.
Okay.
I remember was like, hey, we're Slock.it, this is what we're doing, and we're going to do a DAO with it. And it's like, oh, cool. But then they kept working on that DAO stuff after DevCon 1, and it just seemed to like warp into, well, we've made like a DAO framework, it's a DAO library, you know, because we want other people to be able to do this as well. But then that sort of turned into, well, actually, how about it isn't just us? How about it could be anything? Like anyone could have a service provider. You could propose anything into it. And then it became the DAO.
Okay.
And it wasn't capped. There was no cap on the contributions into it. There was really nothing else that you could do on Ethereum at that point. It was kind of like the first application, really. Yeah. Well, I mean, you did have a few. You had Digex, this gold thing. You did have DAI, I think, was sort of coming to life just about at that point. But the DAO was kind of like the first big thing.
Right.
And it just sort of snowballed and snowballed, right? Because it's like it was also touted as zero risk, because you could exit with your funds, right? If you didn't like the result of what was happening, you could just exit and have your F back. So it's kind of like, this is risk-free, right? It's like a risk, you know, it's like a sovereign bond or whatever, right?
Right.
There's no downside here. This is risk-free. So tons of people are like, well, what else am I going to do? I'm just sitting here on my Ether. I can't do anything. Well, you know, pile on in. And the Ethereum crowd sale raised, what is 16 million, I think, in Bitcoin, which was, I think it was number 5 crowd sale of all time. You know, it was like comparing to Kickstarter projects.
Right. So
it's like, you know, maybe the DAO will do, you know, 2 or 3 million, maybe 5. And it just went woof, until it was, you know, it was just absolutely gigantic. And I remember at the time thinking, you know, I don't like this. Like the DAO, this is not a good idea.
Yeah.
And the main reason I was thinking of that was, is this a security?
Right.
Is this seen as, you know, money transfer stuff? Because you got Slock.it, the company, and then they had this thing called DAO Link that was sort of a service company for paying people in real life. That was some Swiss thing, I think, or what's the Bitcoin Swiss. And then you had the DAO itself. You had the curators as well. So anyone could propose, you know, a smart contract that encoded their proposal, right? They would make a written description of the thing, and here's a smart contract doing it. And the curator's role was like to verify, yeah, what they've sort of said in text is kind of what they've done. It was meant to be like, you know, this kind of administrative role. But what happened is all of those guys, that was their names and faces up on the website. You know, so like DAO Hub website is just like a who's who of the Ethereum Foundation, basically. Right. And it didn't say, you know, Christian Reitweisner, creator of Solidity. It said Christian Reitweisner, Ethereum Foundation, Vitalik, Ethereum Foundation. You know, so lots of people were like, this is an Ethereum Foundation project, right? Because you're all got your names on everything. So I thought there was huge like legal liability on those guys, because where Slock.it had got these layers of legal protection, these guys haven't. They're just doing it as individuals. Right. And I remember Fabian talking to me and talking to the group in the foundation. It's like, you know, I've been talking to some of my friends and they're like, you know, they don't think this is a great idea, and I'm thinking of talking to a lawyer, and Gav backed out, right? A couple of weeks before the disaster, Gav just backed out. He's like, you know, this is not what I signed up for. I thought it was just a small role, and now it's like presented as a lot more, and you know, so he backed out. A lot of the others didn't. Because it was like, well, if we back out, it's going to like ruin it, and it's like a great experiment. But I thought there was huge liability to them. I thought there were legal risks, and I also just thought it was a stupid idea. Like, why would you have thousands of random people putting their money in a bucket and then let's like vote on what to do with it?
Right.
Who are these people? Like, what do they even know? Like about a business proposal or anything? It's just like, this is a stupid idea. But, you know, I didn't have my eye on the fact that all of the tech stack was incredibly immature at that point, right?
Yeah.
There's no best practices. There's no libraries. It's just, here's some code. And they just went all in, right? It was like, code is law. Yeah. The contract, you know, the smart contract is the contract. You know, YOLO, you can't stop us. Kaboom.
But okay. And then the hack happens, right? And I remember the details of the hack being, they found a flaw in the smart contract code, and they could basically withdraw those funds into another account. And I remember there was some kind of race between like the people at the DAO / Slock.it who were like using the same exploit to like drain the account, like using the same hack, basically. Is that right?
Yeah, so there was this reentrancy bug where it's really sort of like to do with atomic operations or order of operations. So your reentrancy was that you could be calling, because people were supplying like their proposals, and it's like, hey, here's a smart contract that's implementing mine. You were like calling into their code, but you can't know what theirs is going to do. Mm-hmm. So there was this reentrancy issue where within that other person supplied code, you could like kind of call back in, and it was sort of like, so it was to do with child DAOs. So this whole zero risk thing was like, if you didn't like proposals that were happening, you could make a child DAO of saying, well, hey, I'm out, right? I'm taking my ether and my voting off into this other one, right? I'm not following you. I'm going there. And other people could join you as well. So I guess the idea was like, right, you know, here we've got this totally overgeneral DAO, but we're going to make a, you know, like a DeFi DAO or an NFT DAO or a whatever, right? And it's like, I guess a little bit like some of the thoughts for consensus and hub and spoke is like, you know, you're going to get this universe of stuff just flourishing out and childs and so on. But yeah, the problem on that child DAO thing is that there was this reentrancy bug where rather than just being able to pull your ETH or your share, you could actually go in and pull more and more. So you had this hacker using this, had a child DAO and pulling a giant amount of the funds into that child DAO, and then within 30 days they'd be able to exit with the funds. But kind of the blessings, I guess, of that setup is they're not immediately exiting with the funds, right? They haven't gone already and sold it on an exchange and they're done before you notice. You have got this period. And then the other thing is that you could join them. You can go into the child DAO as well. So after the hack, you know, there was this appeal out, hey, you know, did anyone participate in this, you know, specific child DAO? Was anyone in there? And it's like, yeah, you know, yeah, somebody else is in there. And then what you could do is you could child DAO again. It's like, you could do another one. It's like, right, well, I'm going to grab it off you and you're going to grab it off me. And so, you know, you could have had this DAO wars thing of like, you can never stop it, but you could delay it indefinitely. So that was one of them. But then the other white hat thing is like, okay, well, we know about the bug, so we can do it too. You can have white hat people like, well, we're going to steal all of the money out of the top DAO as well, but we're doing it for good, right? We're doing it here to keep it, to give it back.
Right.
So yeah, you had all of those games going on within that existing setup, but then as a reaction to that, you had all of this discussion about, well, you know, are we going to react? Are we not going to react? The first proposal was a soft fork, but you know, it was just going to like blacklist out stuff to do with the hacker, right?
And they did do that soft fork, right? I remember they did that soft fork first.
The code was done for it, and I think it might even have gone on testnets and things, but it never went live.
Okay.
Because it was spotted that it was a denial of service attack.
Got it.
Because that blacklisting was like, you know, not accounted for in the crypto economics. So it was like, you had a denial of service attack thing on that soft fork. So it got done and then it got undone. And then the hard fork was like, okay, well, we can go in and we can do an irregular state transaction where at a certain block, you know, you're just going to have a hard-coded thing which sticks different bytecode into the address of the DAO, which is like, okay, yeah, that thing, it didn't happen. You know, what's actually at that address is a simple refund thing where you can all get your money back. So that was the DAO hard fork.
Okay.
And that's
I just wanted to ask, where were you at this time? Because I know you got involved, I believe, later with ETC because it didn't exist yet. And so, you know, how, in terms of your personal perspective on all of this, were you actually implementing it, anything yourself? Because obviously you've got pretty deep knowledge of the technical internals.
So
where were you?
I was working for the foundation. I was on the C++ team at that point. This was about 3 or 4 months after I'd started. The thing that was really interesting to me was how different people's thoughts or perspectives were, even within the foundation. You know, that you'd have people, say, working on Geth, going, well, of course we shouldn't do anything. Well, of course we should. And it's like, you know, been working with you for a year. Like, what? What, you think that? Like, whoa. You know, you had this real mixture of reactions. And I mean, my first reaction was, well, you know, of course you don't do anything. Like, it's an immutable blockchain. That's the whole point. Like, you know, you don't like the outcome. Well, you know, tough titties. You know, you've seen so many, you know, like Mt. Gox. You know, with Mt. Gox, you didn't have the Bitcoiners going, oh, you know, let's try and fix this up. Or, you know, I think the only reason it happened was because of the scale of it. You know, that it was a significant chunk of the entire ETH money base. And also I think that, you know, things weren't super great on funding, and, you know, it wasn't like Ethereum was sure to succeed. It was quite, you know, nascent at that point.
Yeah.
And I know that there were also worries about the proof of stake transition, and the fact that if you had a large amount of the ether in, you know, hostile hands, that you could maybe have years of like griefing attacks and stuff like that. But also I think there was just, you know, a lot of people were like, well, you know, it's theft, right? You know, that money was intended for building the ecosystem, and, you know, some guys come in and stolen it, and if we can fix that, well, we should. So yeah, I mean, you know, my immediate reaction was you shouldn't, but I also, it was like, well, you know, whatever, that seems to be the consensus that we do it, you know, and okay, off, you know, off we go. Though I wasn't at the foundation many more months after that anyway, but you know, there was this real schism, though I think from what I saw, I think probably about 85% of people wanted to do the hard fork and 15 didn't, or maybe 80-20. But I think there was pretty strong consensus to do it. But that was, you know, very contentious for, you know, a not tiny group of people. You know, that a lot of people that had got involved with Ethereum had done so because they kind of wanted smart, you know, Bitcoin with smart contracts. And if you're of that Bitcoiny mindset, then yeah, like, of course you don't, you know, don't screw with things. But I think there's also this larger group that were like, well, Ether isn't money anyway. Like, that was a messaging that had been given out at the time, is like, no, it's fuel, right? It's fuel for the engine. Though I think part of that is just like trying to dodge legal liability. But you know, that was also true as well. You know, this whole world computer, you know, here's a platform, right? You know, it's a platform like the web or Android. So I think it was sort of like that was the mental split, is like, is it money? And if it's money, you don't move people's monies without private keys. Like, you know, that's a mortal sin. And on the other side, you're like, well, no, it's a bug, right? It's a bug in the platform. And it's like, well, but it was a bug in the smart contract. Well, you know, if you've worked on serious software projects, you know, people hack shit on the wrong layers all the time.
Right.
Because it's going to give you a better user experience. Like, you know, you don't have to be, you know, pure on that. It's really about how the thing works. So, you know, you get hacks in the wrong layers all the time. And if you're just seeing it as a software platform, then yeah, it's a bug. You fix the bug.
So it's rare in life that you can actually see a counterfactual, but in this case, we can, because ETC was created at that time and kind of emerged out of that. So like, you know, can you talk a little bit about that, and how has that gone? Because you're deep into that ecosystem, obviously, as the, you know, director of the Ethereum Classic Cooperative. Like, how does it work now? Like, you know, how did those words divide? And then, you know, how are those words continuing?
So over that month or so, right, where it's like, you know, the money's been stolen into the sub DAO, but we're going to do anything. You know, you have the most, you know, vigorous debate on all platforms, right? You know, it was the topic, you know, what's going to happen, how's it going to go, and everything, right? So, you know, I don't think there's anyone that was like unaware of this stuff happening. You know, it's very, very everyone with their eyes open. But yeah, you know, you just have this group of people kind of gathering together, and it's like, no, you know, we're not going to go with it. This is not going to happen, or at least, like, you know, we're not following that hardcore. Maybe people do, but you know, a bunch of people deciding not to. The other thing I thought was really interesting at the time, and was, to my mind, the best thing of all about that chain split, is, to that point, I don't think there'd ever been a minority chain that survived. Right, the standard thinking is like, you're going to have a winning side and a losing side, and you know that it's going to happen, and we'll see where's the thing, you know, where are the people going, which is the winner, and then the losers, you know, well, you know, like people will stop mining, it will just die, right? Because it's the loser chain, so there's no economic value there, and you know, forget it. But what actually happened on the ETC side is, you know, you had miners that were like, well, you know, just going to keep on mining. I'm not updating. You know, some of it going, you know, the evil Ethereum Foundation, and you know, Vitalik's a dictator. You know, I mean, I don't think any of that's true. But you had got people that were like, no, I'm going to keep going, and then oh, look, block production's still going, and you know, it's still happening there. And then Poloniex listed it, and then it's got a market value, and then you've got speculative activity around that. You've got Ether holders like dumping their ETC, you know, it's, hey, it's free money. But also you've got other people on the other side going, well, you know, I see real value here, and like this ETC is going cheap. So, you know, notably Barry Silbert, who first non-Bitcoin in Ethereum to that point, presumably like based on pre-mine and various other things, but was like, well, oh, actually, like, you know, an immutability focused ETC, you know, would be really interesting. So yeah, you just got this sort of grassroots thing forming. You got volunteers jumping up saying, hey, you know, I'm a developer, I'll keep maintaining the classic Geth clients and so on. And you know, and it found its own legs there. You know, you had like the Ethereum subreddit was like a primary communication platform at that point, and then you had like an Ethereum Classic one, you know, being created, and some people in, you know, one side, some on the other, but you know, it got quite bitter in the end, right? You know, you got a lot of people that were like, you know, Foundation, you guys, you just ruined, you know, you've just ruined the project. And you had people on the other side seeing ETC as really illegitimate, you know, as saying, well, look, you know, it's just a money grab, you just want your free money. You know, why are these Bitcoiners kind of coming over? Like, they weren't interested in Ethereum before, and now they are. Like, that's not, you know, that's not good. And you did obviously have a bunch of speculators in there as well, so that's sort of a bit nasty too. But I think the thing that like severed those communities finally was this like 100% F meme, which came about because somebody tweeted, hey Vitalik, I hear that you're working on Ethereum Classic, is there any truth to this? And he said, no, you know, I'm only working on Ethereum. And the person then said, well, what if ETC had more market cap than Ethereum? And he said, no, I still wouldn't work on it 100% F. Like, he wasn't saying it in a purity pledge way. He was just, in the way he does, being making a factual statement. But then I remember, you know, Joe replied, you know, I'm 100% F. And then it's like everyone's doing it, right? It's this purity pledge. You know, everyone is expected to, you know, pledge allegiance to F. So it became a, you know, oh shit, is this an either or? Like, you can't be in both. Like, if you're interested in ETC, then you know, you're a dirty person. So I think that really wedged it permanently apart at that point. And also, you know, a number of the people that were volunteering on ETC, you know, they were really angry. They were like, you know, well, like, you know, been involved for two and a bit years in this project, you know, really pumped about everything that you can do with Ethereum, and then you guys have, you know, have wrecked it. So there was a lot of, you know, bitterness from that ETC side back. But then, you know, things kind of split apart, and over time ETC, you know, found its own path. So with the real differentiation being, well, firstly, that the DAO hack didn't happen. That was the only initial difference. Very rapidly, though, there was this conclusion that fixed economic policy was needed. You know, that ETC was really like Bitcoin with Ethereum technology, but, you know, Bitcoin, you know, culture and ethos. So it's like, right, you know, there's no fixed monetary policy for Ethereum. And I mean, you see this over many years, is like, you know, change of block rewards, ice age delays, fee burning, you know, many changes. So that was the first kind of like major change on the ETC side, was introduction of that fixed monetary policy, because there was consensus that that was an important, you know, that was like bad inheritance that we want to fix. And the other thing that enabled was the Grayscale ETC fund. So at that point, it's like, right, okay, this is really a Bitcoin feeling thing, and you know, there's a feeling that there's value here. So then from that, Grayscale then created the ETC Cooperative that I worked from. You know, so a share of the fees went into that kind of, not quite a foundation, but a bit like a foundation, you know, a non-profit to support the ecosystem. And then the other thing more recently is just proof of work. You know, there was sort of fairly rapidly a consensus that ETC wanted to stick with proof of work indefinitely, that proof of stake was seen as a, you know, as a centralizing oligarchic kind of thing that didn't really fit with that ethos. But more generally, ETC is tracking protocol changes in Ethereum, you know, very compatible. But,
so there have been forks, but not the hard fork along the way, because you know, you need
well, so that, yeah, I mean, they hard forks, but not chain splits.
Got it. Okay.
In the all protocol updates on Ethereum as well, you know, they're all hard forks, and the old side doesn't actually go away. You know, you could run a Frontier node if you wanted. You can mine on Frontier, mine the Olympic testnet, mine any of these ones. It's just you have had the wither and die because there hasn't been contention. But on ETC, you had sufficient contention that you had a chain split. But yeah, I guess that's a sort of a Bitcoiner thing, is saying, you know, forks are bad.
Right.
But it's like contentious hard forks are bad. Hard forks are an upgrade mechanism for the protocol.
Got it.
Yeah, I mean, I remember I had to implement that fork a few years ago, and it was pretty blatant. It was just like, take money from here and place it here. By the way, it didn't bug me, but we had people at BlockApps who thought of it as like a stab to the back. They were like so upset by it. So.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's literally, here's an array of addresses, right? To fuck with.
Yep. I remember that was, I don't remember what else was in there, but I remember like the majority of it was just like, take a bunch of money and put it into these addresses. And that was the fork.
Yeah. You know, for this list of addresses, replace, you know, it was, you know, replace the bytecode with this other bytecode. And also, yeah, I think the moving was consolidating the child DAOs. I think that's what that was doing. So it's like, move the money from the child DAOs back into the parent DAO and change the bytecode. Like, I think, you know, if block equals this, do a horrible thing.
But in
block
the
equals
ETC
this,
world,
steal money.
Sorry, go ahead, Jim. Yeah. In the ETC world where the DAO hack happened, are those fun? Like, did the hacker pull out those funds? Okay, so like,
yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, I mean, again, Laura Shin has a great write-up of all of this in her book, The Cryptopians, including working out who it probably was.
Oh, wow. Okay. Wow.
So she didn't name names in the book, but then she did an article like on the release day or just before, naming who she thinks it was. So that's an interesting story. I'll dig out that article and send it to you guys so you can add it to the description here.
Cool. But you know, Bob, you're a natural born bridge builder. As we said, you get along with everyone. Do you ever see the, you know, valley between Ethereum and Ethereum Classic narrowing or getting better, or do you think it is getting better?
I mean, the problem that Ethereum Classic has always had from the time of the split, and it comes back to money again. like I think that was the one thing that the foundation did wrong. You know, like not talking about the developers or the decision on that or whatever, was to only put the money on one side. Because what that did is disenfranchised a good chunk of people who had, you know, invested in the pre-sale, who'd been part of that community, who'd genuinely been, you know, actively involved for those first 2 years, and they were just left in the dust. It's like, you know, fuck you guys, we don't care what you think, goodbye.
Right.
You know, and the trademarks going this way and all the funds are going this way, and, you know, and all the developers went that way as well. And I mean, obviously, like, the foundation couldn't control that, what people choose to work on. But what that meant is effectively that group of people got defunded. Like, totally done. I'm sorry, my child, I disavow you and I kick you out of the house, you know, forever, and we shall never talk to you again. You know, I think in retrospect, it should have been like, okay, funding is available for that other fork as well, and you may hate us, you know, and not want to talk to us, but you know, I guess it's like a child, you know, whatever, teenager, I'm fuck you, Dad, I'm leaving home, and it's like, okay, but I'm not going to stop putting aside savings and money for you, right? You know, you might not love me now, but you know, you're my child too, and you know, we'll find a way of making it happen. You know, because say with the ETC Cooperative, you know, it could have been, well, when that came into, you know, into existence, the foundation could have gone, well, okay, you know, like, here's a body that can help, and there you go, we're going to fund it as well. And that there was something a little tiny bit like that with Virgil. So Virgil was also a huge bridge builder between Ethereum and Ethereum Classic. So in 2018, he invited Anthony Lusardi, who was my predecessor, to speak at EdCon. So this was May 2018. And that was the first Ethereum Classic talk at an Ethereum event. You know, it'd been nearly 2 years at that point. And, you know, and it was fine and it was cool and everyone was, you know, everyone was friendly, and, you know, Vitalik and various others came to that talk, and, you know, it was all kind of friendly. And Anthony invited me to Ethereum Classic Summit, which was in September 2018. So myself and Virgil went and spoke at that event. And around that time, Virgil, they found some ETC that the foundation still had. You know, generally they did a market dump at that time, but there was some stuff that they found, you know, so it's like 50 grand or something like that, and so we got that donated to the co-op, which was great. You know, that was a really nice kind of thing. But you know, it was kind of like, here's a little gesture. But really, I think that was a real failing, because it was a legitimate, you know, irreconcilable difference. But it was made even worse by this, you know, 100% ETH purity pledge, combined again with all the money's gone. So you end up with, you know, a very small community of mainly people who are, you know, very ideologically outraged by it. You know, if you've got speculative token holders, obviously they're going to stick with Ethereum. You know, what's this other thing, this new thing, and there's nothing, you know. So that's always been the issue that ETCs had, is, you know, lack of money and interest, really. More recently, we've had support from Bitmain. After the merge with Ethereum moving to proof of stake, all of a sudden ETC is one of the larger mining ecosystems. So all of a sudden we're very aligned with Bitmain. You know, they want to sell ASICs, they want to be using Antpool for mining. So they're supporting a grant program now. But yeah, you know, ETCs, you know, it's small, but you have some people, and that's what they want.
Yeah. And as you said, like, you know, like, it's broken the mode of like sidechain surviving, right? Like like, you know, it's possible, you know. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Kieran.
I wanted to talk quickly about, you know, the definition of success for blockchains, market caps, and all that sort of thing. And I was looking today because so Ethereum's market cap is in the 200 billions. Ethereum Classic is still at number 28, which is quite impressive, and is, you know, 2.6 billion in market cap. I think market cap is probably more of an indicator of popularity than anything, I don't know, sort of truly long term. You know, it's not quite like with companies where market cap is probably a better indicator of how important they are, but it is also still. And then if you look,
yeah.
So
if you look in CoinGecko, so Ethereum Classic is higher than Cosmos, than Filecoin, than Hedera, than Internet Computer, than Aptos, than Lido, than Nia, than Optimism, than Arbitrum, than the Graph, you know.
And so I wanted to follow, you know, is market cap a good goal? What is your goal for ETC if you were trying to, you know, make up the gap with Ethereum? Well, you know, would you do anything differently?
I mean, I think to do that, you just need vast investment into application layer. I mean, I think that's somewhere where ETC really can't compete with many other VC chains, you know, that have huge treasuries that can be spending, you know, tens or hundreds of millions on grant programs. You know, that's, you know, we can't compete that way. But also, it, as you say, it's a bit of a vanity metric in a way. You know, like there are many other vanity metrics that we commonly see in the space. Because yeah, you know, if you want whatever the fastest chain or the most money or whatever, like, yeah, that's not going to be ETC. Like, it can never be ETC. But for people that are interested, that's not the goal, right? They, you know, they're looking for something which is basically like Bitcoin plus smart contracts, you know, with that kind of strong non-intervention kind of bias, and also proof of work. You know, a lot of people see, you know, real value in proof of work and are very skeptical of proof of stake systems. So, you know, it's not, you know, it's not a winner takes all.
It's been interesting just how not a winner takes all the blockchain space has been. They've had this. They're like cockroaches. They just kind of, you know, keep going. I know they get delisted occasionally, but you know how many? Let's see how many pages you can get to on.
Can we call them tree clippings instead of
20,000 is the figure I've heard.
Yeah,
20,000 live chains.
Yeah.
That's quite a number, and very interesting, kind of in and of itself. Victor, you were saying something when I made my comment.
Oh no. I was just saying, I was going to ask you more questions about, you know, the early days of EEA, but I think we will have to invite you back because I'm pretty sure we could have another, you know, another 90-minute conversation on that. But it's been great to have you, Bob. As always, you're always been a great friend and a wealth of information on the space. So thank you for joining us, and we hope you'll come back again soon.
Well, thank you, and sorry for monopolizing me.
No, this is exactly
that's why you're here. Yeah,
exactly.
Your story, we've told plenty of ours. Should we, you know, I see on other podcasts, should we send people anywhere? Where can people find you? Do you want them to find you, etc.?
Yeah, I can drop you some links afterwards. But yeah, my own website is bobsummerwill.com. Ethereumclassic.org is the main sort of landing page for ETC.
Awesome.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much. Really appreciate your time. And I'm sure we will follow up. We'll put our heads together and do another one when we're all ready.
We'll have to have a round two. There's plenty more stories that we haven't even touched on yet.
Okay.
care.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers.